Good, good morning. It's John Charles. I'm at Valley General Hospital. The problems are compounding. I am identifying my financiers who are using the money from the franchise division of the accounts. This is the account that probably is linked to wealth. What they've done is gone and used this for purchase, or it's one. It could be Hanover or one of the other major royal accounts. We're not sure, but you have to understand when I talk about this. It's very early in the morning right now. I'm tired. Excuse me. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you had a good weekend. I'm struggling. I'm in pain. I have to have a good doctor. I don't want to use the doctors here. It's not safe. Downtown Seattle has a totally different police force, and it is geared at taking money. And these people that come in and hired to take money. We're not sure if I do know that there were a few officers murdered when I was on the streets in Seattle at the nighttime, and I had strong attempts on my life, and several people threatening to shoot me up and put drugs in my body, and me getting up just in time and moving away. So this is very dangerous. I'm not a drug user. I don't drink. I smoke, obviously, and a very cold, bad diet. I gained a lot of weight, and I can't. My mobility is limited. I am struggling here with the finance managers who are making me research and making people research to find who ran the original subsidiaries to. The problem that happens here is when they're exposed, then these people who have taken our finance, because it is a real trust, are going into subsidiaries and knocking down the old accounts, which affects the stocks, and which affects people all around the country who own the stocks. It's illegal, and Chris Economo, Dave Economo, is the name that you need to put with Chris. Dave looked like Chris. This crime happened in Bellevue about a year and a half ago. Several women were involved in this crime with their kids in the city of Bellevue, and this must have started in Seattle. It was a coup. I blame Mrs. McCaw for a lot of this with her friend circle. Mandy Lincoln is a female too, and also Mrs. Jobs, Steve Jobs. The amount of Apple that was owed me, and why Malcolm Cannon and Jeff Berger and Christine Cannon would get the Apple computers is beyond me. Obviously, it happened with the banks with a scheme that was very, very big. And Malcolm Cannon originally there were hair clients in mind. What they did was use hair clients to separate my business and allow them my finance. Mallory Nielsen was not my client. She was friends with one of my clients, Nancy Duck. And Nancy Duck, husband, married Irish, and obviously was into some of the Irish families. So very nice people, but enticed into a very big crime. Um, some very key players were up in the northeastern, on one of the rivers of northeast Washington. I don't have their name, but Misty McEwen is one of the big players who was going to France, and I'm jumping around here, but it's very important that you get the names when I say McEwen in France, or the owners of Patagonia Clothing in my Patagonia account, which is an account that is a very important account because it was willed from somebody who probably was one of my family members and died, and probably had been moved to Patagonia. So this was probably a finance that was put there probably by somebody in my family for somebody who was related to him who went to Patagonia after World War II, possibly. Um, I, I, I can't see the Patagonia account being anything but something to help somebody try to live after the loss of the war, and it's a very difficult account for me to see a clothing store take because they're into the other ones as well, and they were feeding vacations to people, so they were actually in the setup, in the credit cards and everything. The credit cards are set up for their travel, and this is something that was done in a very positive manner to try to make sure that we had funding when we went. These credit cards are all over the country. We've turned somebody in Mandy Stanton in Rockport, Maine. We also have people staying at Waldorf Astorians. We know that police were getting those credit cards. And they start to target it once, they'll target it again. So I would imagine some of the Seattle policemen that were originally in these files are traveling and staying at these Waldorfs. The one down by Gerber Baby Food is one that is very much in danger. The problem that I'm dealing with, I don't even know who's alive in my family. Here's one thing that I'm going to announce today. I've lost a member of my family. I believe his phone was taken away, and his name was Mike Charles on the Eastern Seaboard. And Mike is a second cousin on Alphonse's side, which means this isn't on the Chicago side, but he is one of my cousins who would be underneath me in the will. As soon as he was exposed, they went after the family member to take the phone and try to take calls and try to take over accounts, which he may have already been going into, but he's not actually above us in the trust. But I want to make an announcement to people who claim they're in the trust in Dubai and in especially in the principal of Hanover. So when it comes to Monaco, I have talked about Ernest Augustus and his family. I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take down Ernest Augustus' son right now, because obviously I'm in danger for a reason, and I do not want the children to have any rights to this. I don't have anything legally in writing, and it's very important that Monaco knows that if they're not willing to help me, they're not in the trust. I've lost a family member very close to my bloodline, and yours is more distant than his. So he is, you have Hanover in blood, but you do not have rights to my trust, and you do have a responsibility to help your family and not cash. And so as this has happened, I have Monaco and Monte Carlo Casino and hotel profits that I'm not receiving, and you're making no effort to get to me. It's very important that you realize you are not in my trust unless you have signatures and you have shown any type of consideration to this family in this dire time and this extreme struggle and the murders that we're experiencing across the country. This slaughter is not going to benefit Monaco and Monte Carlo if you can't pay your bills. And as I see it, you paid it to the Warners. You know, I'm not receiving my Warner Brothers payment. So what you're doing is paying somebody who hasn't paid me, which makes it even fucking stupid, or I mean, more idiotic when you see it on paper. I'm not in the mood for this shit. Carolyn's involvement with Karl Lagerfeld is one that is obviously a relationship that linked to Hollywood and was very old. I do believe he was in the trust. He had owed money, did not pay it, and had exposed his opinions to Princess Caroline, which isn't, they're not my opinions. And it's very important to know. My career has been ruined, and I'm not getting assistance from Carolyn, or I never got assistance from Lagerfeld. We had a person named Rasheen Wang and her husband Danny Wang, who interfered with the hackers that were around my father about the time of my mother's death when I entered their lives to try to stop this crime. We had been exposed to this financial information in little pieces our entire life because of John and Mary Charles getting into the finance. John is John. That is my grandfather's name. He had been dead for 4 generations. I am the one in the will. My father and mother were, and John and Mary Charles were involved in Seattle politics and Seattle public schools, and actually started moving money illegally because it wasn't their account, but using the name. This involved Quest, and I'm pretty sure that in CenturyLink, who have been absolutely tearing our accounts apart and using the basement lockers, the sports lockers at CenturyLink Field or Old Quest Field, and hiding somebody calling and actually moving antiquities into that arena and moving them down from Seattle Art Museum to hide them after they're moved by the Art Museum illegally by Charles Wright, as who originally did, and David Dean involved with Bain, who the article below talks about. This situation makes me jump around extremely, but I have so much to say, as you can see when I write. The main point here, when I have to write to expose these things, is we're involved in a very large United States criminal network in the Northwest, and I have my pages public for a reason, because I have to allow other people to find me. When I'm exposing a person like this who's so guilty with not getting my information to me and using the accounts to get ownership like so many people have, like Howard Schultz, predecessors, Schulman, and just the whole group, Witsit, all of them, digging into the money, using the NBA as an excuse. I can't fathom the parallels with the finance I'm exposing and the ownership I'm exposing. And the show, The Shark Tank, why Mark Cuban's name is coming up every day, and the Damon's name. David Damon is being linked, the one who was trying to get into the Cochner lobster trap and finance through U.S. Foods, was linked to the murder of a lady in Bellevue to take finance to move away. And they're claiming he is a brother of Mark Cuban's counterpart on the TV show Sharks. We have no affiliation with this. The networks are using our money to do these programmings, and the Food Network is one of them. A meal is not a meal who is in my family, obviously, the phonograph a meal. This is a just insane banking to try to cover up. Casey Reardon had a husband. I don't have his name. He was a broker out of New York. I really think he has to be identified to see if he's alive. Casey Reardon was in Los Angeles, and she would stay at the Waldorf quite a bit. It's going to be hard to find information, but we believe she was murdered. Somebody came up to try to help me. Casey and Dan Reardon and Molly Reardon had money, and Kelly Reardon, for quite a while, and they've involved the Griffiths family, who had brothers and sisters in horse racing, and they were linked to the McGows because of the Seward Park area. Now, and that's where Michael Shanahan, my doctor, who brought me in the world, who was doing my checkups for me to leave. He actually had communication with London and wasn't allowing me to leave, and making excuses about my health to keep me from going. And I've always been very healthy, partied a lot when we're in, but not enough to keep me here till I was 17 or 18. I have a gay son traveling around the world, Michael Shanahan's son. So this is where the bigger crime comes in. Patrick Shanahan was the Secretary of Defense recently and fired. He was a doctor for UW-Medicine. He had links to this trust. He also moved into a location where I had been quite a bit because of my doctor. It was in Seward Park. So I had shown there on the satellite reads. And so the McGows moved in next door. The Landers lived there. The Buffums lived there. The O'Briens lived in that area, and all these people were pulling money, the Chins, and so the Seward Park, because of Michael Shanahan, had a lot of information that was passed out. The Stones and the Giles were linked to this area, and many of those properties were ours as we linked Sayers and Seward's name to old America, which a lot of these families aren't linked to. Seward Park, Stan Sayers Pitts is in Seward Park. So our parks, John Charles Parks and Recreation Fund, was being used by parks to maintain these. And we believe the parks and recreation was the beginning of theme parks. And so we know that we're linked to the roller coaster through and Ferris wheel through our dealings in metals. So we have very old links to those accounts through the Siemens and through the walls, in the sense of the walls are not necessarily direct to our family, but they are direct to the Stouts. You have to remember, we were merchants. We weren't on the ground like these people. It's very hard. And when you see the name John Reich, and we were in the Reichen line, and this is part of the trust. The Reich line is in our trust, and they should be going to us, and I should be getting the credit cards, and I should be getting the old letters from Willy Brandt and Wilhelm. They should be coming to me on what they are as being stolen by criminals and people trying to take our place and move to go to Germany. Becky Eilert was very involved in this. So you have to understand the steel is very important that we pointed out, and also this entertainment or links to our earlier our subsidiary helping support electronics and our ties to GE and investment are not going to show up all the time, but our presence on the trust is factual matter because that information was revealed at the time of writing the trust. So when you see GE going to our family, we don't have to explain it. It's the problem is we have too many people illegally breaking federal law in our trust, trying to trying to do something that should be done in court. And the actual grandfathering that people are talking about in the homes and things like that, we are actually the grandfather people in the trust. So when we pay the property taxes, we're the ones grandfathered in. And legally, you'd have to go to court to fight that. What I'm trying to do is make sure that these people who have been on properties on the eastern seaboard aren't pulled out of their homes, replaced by these people coming out of the prisons and coming from difficult situations around the country to try to take over accounts and take over homes. And this is what's happening because these financiers and these NBA people have been so belligerent in NFL, like the Allens, and Paul Allen's sister and his wife and Vulcan, not allowing us to run our properties and try to introduce, instead of Bodocker, the Hodockers or the architects, when we're linked to the old architectural firm through blood, and he is not. And it's also very important to know that I need a legal team to help me out to get to the Shiloh, to the Hudson Bay properties, because it's obviously, they said it was a Dutch trading company, a Dutch Post, and I've proved, if you read my articles over the past few days, that this is nothing but part of the German line linked to the merchants in my family. What we're seeing is Stout and Drake down towards Jackson's Casino, Ranchero, something, I'm not, Rancho Cucamonga. I'm not sure who's running this casino, but it better not be from our gaming profits. I'm seeing the Drakes, the Stouts, other old names in a community down there, and the Stouts are very prestigious when it comes to early America. There's no doubt about it, but they're not. From the first boats, that's not who we came prior to the Stouts, and that is clear, and we kept moving around. Great, and as far as the Drakes go, in California, they need to realize that this story is very big, and if they want to stick to Stout, they're missing the boat, because that's what happened in the 1500s. They weren't on the right boat. We were on the Gilbert's boat, and then we linked up with Drake and Trade. So these maps went back and linked to as the Drakes married to the Churchills, and we know that there are lines in the Churchill family that are hard to trace, but they do actually run towards our family, and that is Winston Churchill's great grandfather. So line. So what's happened in London is that we were supposed to be there, and I believe that we have replacements that went for years, like Marty Woods and Brenda, linked to the Griffin family, probably back in 1960s. Faye Moss was involved in trying to keep us here. We believe she had a patch that said she was calling Charles, so she was trying to act as my mother, as Bill Moss was, trying to act as Fred Charles. And this has confused things tremendously in a little game of them to turn the money over to their kids. I'm very close to those people, but they're very different now, and I don't. I don't know what happened. Faye Moss started coming in with a lady named Pat, and Pat would come in to sit with Faye at the haircuts, and I believe she involved her with Christine O in the Renton area. Now I believe they were organized crime linked to washing money down in Vegas. I'm not sure what, or Reno. I'm not sure what casino, but that's where they're going. We are having a hard time linking these accounts. I know that my nieces at one time had access to the Brunswick the bowling accounts, and we're using them, and some of the theater accounts. But I am not sure if these are still my real nieces. And the word is one of my nieces may have been killed last night. So this is something I'm fighting. Is a lot of rumors, but they used to take off on vacations. My niece Mandy Robinson, Mandy Charles Robinson, is definitely handling my trust at one time, and somehow another group got a hold of a section of phones, and they went to Los Angeles, and that's when we started to hear about Mandy Pete having a phone, and Jalen Smith, Will Smith's family, being involved in this. And this is not an impossible thing, as we have seen Charles Barkley and Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan be in a cul-de-sac that was linked to our family's property at one time in Florida. So the NBA is very involved in the money and has too much information. And this links back to my childhood and my friendships. So when Rick Welts got involved in the NBA, there were other people from Seattle that were involved in this player personnel situation as well. So the player personnel job, I believe, was somebody who was actually working with the finance on the trust. Rick Welts dated my good friend from my childhood, or not my childhood actually, my late teens, Carol Chin, whose mother worked with my mother with Seattle Public Schools, along with Morty Eskenazi and the Chatalises, and the Patty Luke, and I could go a lot of names, but when the fake John Charles took over and was working as the head of the school district, I believe he started to give money to cover it up to other people. They all got money. My mother didn't receive hers, so they're confused about that being part of the trust, and it wasn't. They're not in this trust at all. The Chatalises had no right to go into it, and the Chatalises were partnered with Chris Economou's uncle George in a restaurant, I believe called the Athenian, in the public market. And these illegal moves through the produce to the market and the meats to the market, all linked to this very old crime that tied the school district and the market and Seattle City Council and the mayor's office together in a union of saying, well, if they don't want the money, it's our money. Well, we do want the money. My mother was cheated and lied to, and our finance person, Jim Bennett, and Mike Johnson were linked to Faye Moss, who was actually robbing us since we were children. So when Jim Bennett allows money to release, he thinks he can cover it up, and it's out of hand, and he runs. And Mike Johnson takes over the money, and he calls my father and says it's not enough money for me to handle, and it's billions. And so he runs, and now he wants to do horse racing around the country with the King Charles and the gaming funds. And we want the funds back, as Monte Carlo is being told right now. I want my money. If you have any affiliation with my family, I want my money. Here's the problem. We do have more family, and they are getting the information. We want lawsuits, and we want definitely the same treatment, the same disrespect right back at these families that will not help us. We do not feel that standing back sitting back trying to figure out what angles they can take on the money is really a proactive approach to trying to help somebody. When I said I need to have lawyers and go in and pick up my finance and have these illegal bankers like Dong, who is struggling trying to find banks to go into right now, but and the Changs and the other bankers' names that I've given you, Cindy Jom, the illegal bankers at Washington Federal, the links to Weissel, the murder of Weissel, and the replacement of Weissel numerous times. Same with Chris Stevens, the murder of Chris Stevens in downtown Seattle when she went into something called one of my life or one of the seasons, and She was involved with a group similar to the Micans, the children that they used, and they were young teens in Seattle. She was raped and murdered. She was kept prisoner, raped and murdered, and this was not uncommon to happen in the Seattle area in different locations. This group of King County Police very involved and very violent, and a lot of the people they brought in were to be bodyguards, and they pulled people from the jails. The King County jailers got very involved in this. This is called human trafficking. I escaped because I gambled and won enough money and finagled a ticket to get out of the country. That's how I got out. They made me come back. They chased, beaten, shot with lasers numerous times, on the run constantly, not sleeping at night, waiting until the morning to get a couple hours till checkout, making sure there were people moving around so I could actually sleep, checking my sheets for powders and dust to make sure every morning when the sheets were changed. My life, for me to live, is amazing. When I was in Thailand, they actually had people up from Australia, from one of the casinos, and also a man whose name I won't remember right offhand, but I've written about him many times, from France, who took a phone with millions on it. Now they're getting the documents. He and his mother was involved with government. And what has happened is this family has allowed him to go ahead and show financial and go ahead and receive the documents. It's still in my name, but he is mysteriously holding a phone with finance on it, which he can go ahead, and it was an active phone he could actually use for money. This is something that Robin Candace Bird was involved, Rick Charles, Biff Moss and his doubles. Anybody who claimed to be in Thailand at that time was involved. Seth Warshawski, Mike West is a very good friend of Seth Warshawski, and his friends who were involved with Rudy's barbershops were traveling around the world when he died in Paris. This is very serious. These guys knew me. I advised them, had an advisement meeting with them prior to them opening Rudy's. Rudy's is a very prestigious barbershop, and there are tons of them that have done okay, but what they did was run money through it. And my grandmother's name is Rudy. They had no permission to go into the Rudy family money, and this is a large amount of money that the owner's his brother is still running around with. This is my money. I believe that he tried to get a hold of me, and at one time, but he was murdered, and we know how, with the electricity at the parties in Paris. His death was not drug related. It was just a mysterious knockout, a lot like Rob Chandler's friend Jason Fieser. It was suffocation. Well, this is Kenneth, who has a lot of my finance linked to Gary Payton of the NBA. She had gotten a computer from our family, and Jason Fieser's dad was a federal attorney or lawyer or judge, and all of a sudden he has our finance. Then he's dead, and then Kenneth has it. And then Kenneth had worked at Ultimate Shoes with Randy, Derek Yang, and Tim. And Randy was linked to Joan Soda. That's the best way I can get him. He's traveling around the world with somebody named Wally and possibly at one time Richard Reiser, who I went to high school with. There's nothing to do with the trust, who had information on the trust early on. This is all very confusing, but I'm going to get back and just center myself here. We had a large amount of gaming money and money moved to a casino called Tulalip. Tulalip has moved money before. I actually had to go to the casino. They said sign up as a player with a player's card. Possibly you can get to the money. They'll give you money. They were giving gamblers money. I'm sorry, I look exhausted, but I guess I am because I'm not allowed a place to live, and I'm not allowed access to my money. So what they did was take this money. They continued to take money. They were also cashing money through the Muckleshoot Casino at the desk. Her name was Chris Stevens. Now, these Chris Stevens linked to UW, definitely, and another person named Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson was living in my condo at one time, about 1980, the same time the money moved through Constantine and his brother. And Constantine is a Greek that's been running my money who had a business next to Ultima Shoes. And I'm talking about Randy and Kenneth and Derek King, who got computers. Constantine got a computer from this banker. The next business was Brassfields, and we put that business together on First Avenue. It's right by Pike Place Fish in the Park Place Market in the Showbox Theater, where Jeff Steichen was. And Jeff Steichen was involved in huge drug trade between Portland, Oregon, and Washington. Okay. But became a very good businessman. Also opened a tequila bar with our tequila money. These properties are linked to the property tax money where these businesses sat. Jeff Wilson was a UW student working for Coldwell Banker, one of the bigger companies, and very, very nice, linked to the racetracks. I knew quite a bit about his life, and Jeff had a divorce because of gambling problems, gambling issues. Then he started to link with my assistant, David Griffiths, with the finance, and started to do trading with David instead of me. Sue Hansis was part of Hansis Lumber Yard in Yakima. She also had money. She left money for me back. Jeff and David took the money, so those stocks were mine, and it was Microsoft investment, and I did not receive it. So the problem we're having here is Jeff Wilson lying quite a bit. He was on a property with a farm with horses, and as his wife said, he gambled and drank too much at that time. Very good-looking young man, but linked to many UWs. I believe linked to Biff Johnson. I believe to the UW Medicine, and he has traveled with Bob Rondo from Como. It's a group of people that like to gamble and fish. The Rondos are not in the trust, and of course Como is very linked to the Fisher crime, which we're finding was something that came up in my writing right here. The Fisher Group is a group I want busted. They'll relate to the Chris Mills, Fisher Flour, Fisher Communications. They try to mix the accounts. That isn't my problem. My problem is getting my Fisher the payments that were actually written on check that were sent to Connie Thompson. Dave Poole stole our mail. That a lot of them were in my mother's name, but my name came up, and they're opening the mail and cashing the checks through the company illegally, so they're looping. This isn't their money. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not Dave Poole. Dave Poole is different now, and I believe many people are involved in this crime and very aware that people are being replaced, and they look alike and they don't know what to do, because the same thing has happened to the police and the CIA. It's organized crime. It's very big, and we have people very, very involved in replacing people. And this goes back again to the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, when the Witness Protection Program, Seattle was used as a harbor for a lot of criminals, and the docks down by Lake Union were involved. The DEA was always very strong after the busts, though, in Seattle, and a lot of people got off, like Kathy Gertzen and Carlos Del Valle, when they very well could have been busted. We're thinking that possibly the DEA